Hey everyone, welcome back to NDC. Today we're kicking off a new SwiftUI for macOS series by building a simple modern notes app. This tutorial is perfect if you're new to desktop development or coming from iOS and just a little bit curious about how macOS apps work differently. We're going to be building everything today within SwiftUI, layout, navigation, macOS only features, and show off what's possible when your app lives in a real Mac window. So I'm going to be showing you these concepts while we build this kind of note app together where we can add new notes. You can see our previous notes on the left side. We have access to things like the sidebar, this little pop-up window here. We can even, add text and even more here. So if you're interested in this, let's go ahead and dive on in and build and learn in Xcode from scratch. Alrighty, so first things first, make sure you have Xcode installed and ready to go, and we're going to create a new project. Now, typically when you create a new Xcode project, you might be on multi-platform, you might be on iOS, but for today, since we're working with a macOS app, we're going to make sure that we have the macOS tab selected in the top here, very important. And then under our application, we're going to just do a normal app. We'll go ahead and press next, and you can name it whatever you like. I'm going to do macOS Notes app. And similar to our iOS SwiftUI settings, we won't need the testing system or storage today. And let's go ahead and create that on our desktop. Alrighty, and fans of SwiftUI and iOS development will kind of see that this looks pretty familiar, right? We kind of have our content view, we have our app file here. So unlike in iOS, our Mac app lives within this window. So you get access to features like toolbars, menus, and flexible window resizing. Alrighty, so first off, we're going to be building a sidebar and a detail view using the NavigationSplitView, which is perfect for apps like Mail, Notes, and Finder. So let's go ahead and create a new empty file on the left side here, and we can go ahead and just call it Note. Alright, we're going to start off by importing SwiftUI and importing Foundation. And next, we're going to create our structure to kind of formulate how our notes are going to look. We're going to create a struct here, and we're going to call it Note. We're going to make it identifiable. We're then going to add our brace here. And now because we're using identifiable, we do need to conform it to the protocol. And this just means we need to include a ID when we do have the identifiable tag here. So let's go ahead and say let ID equals UUID with the empty brackets, and it's going to assign it kind of that unique identifier. Next, we're going to create a variable for the title of said note, which is going to be a string value. And then we're going to create another variable for the body, so like that kind of text body. We're going to be using the string value again. String just allows us to hold text. We're going to navigate back on over to our content view. Alrighty, and in our content view, this is where we kind of handle what the users see and interact with. And under our content view, but before the variable body of some view, we're going to create a state private variable to update our notes. So we're going to create an @state private var, and we're going to call it notes. We're going to use our colon, and we're going to conform it to a list value. So we're going to use our square brackets of the note structure we've just created. We'll then have this equal another list here, and we can actually kind of include some defaults. So we're going to type note, and we can use the autofill feature here to kind of import those parameters. So when we go back to our note, we had the variable of title and the variable of body. This is a constant and is something that's going to be handled for us. All right, back in our content view, let's go ahead and add some values within the title. We can just put welcome. And for the body, let's go ahead and just, suggest to the user to start writing notes here. Cool. After this state variable here, we're going to create another one. So @state private var. And for this one, we can actually have it be for the selected note. We're going to also conform this to the note value. Now, something you may have noticed is I kind of created this variable here, and I use something called camel case. We can't have spaces in our variables here, or it won't compile. So we have to kind of combine words together. So we use the capital letter of the kind of following word to make one compound word. Also, we can't have our variables start with a capital letter. That will cause some errors. But when we do things like structures and classes, they will start with a capital letter. We're also using the question mark at the end of our note here to say that this is something that's optional. It might exist and it might not exist as something that's like a note value. Alrighty, let's start to actually build out our app. So we do have just some placeholder information within our app here. We can see that we have a V stack, which is a vertical stack. It's going to take all of the elements and kind of put them on top of one another. So in the case of where we have the image of globe, you can see that it's actually above the text of hello world. We're going to be getting rid of these placeholders though. So from the dot padding all the way to the V stack, we're going to go ahead and delete that. We're going to start off by creating a navigation split view. We're then going to add the brace and hit return. So this navigation split view, and if you ever want to know a little bit more about what we're using in Swift and SwiftUI, you can hold the option key down and you'll see that our cursor transforms into a little question mark, and we can click on those items to learn more. So this is going to be a view that presents views in 2 or 3 columns, where sections and leading columns control presentations in subsequent columns. When we looked at our app there, we kind of had the, all the notes on the left side, and then on the right side, we kind of had the body where we had the title and the text that went into the note. So this is going to allow us to kind of have some navigation. Next, we're going to create a list because we want to kind of have all of our notes in a row. We're then going to add a bracket, and we're going to include a selection. Just as like a little fun note here too, if you ever want to learn more about any of the elements, you can go to the top right of Xcode here, and we have this plus button, and you can see that we have these different views. And if we type in list, we can see that we actually have a whole bunch of documentation. We even have some examples of how it's being used. But my favorite part is we can actually drag and drop it into our code. So you can see here we have our list, and inside of it we want some content. For us, we're going to add some specifications for our list here. So after the list keyword, we're going to add our brackets. We're going to have a selection. We're going to add our colon, and then we're going to use the $sign, which represents a binding. Something that we're going to be using is that selected note, right? So here where we declared the selected note, we want to kind of link this value to what we have in the list. So we use the $sign or the binding, and we're just going to reference the selected note, use the autofill to avoid any spelling mistakes. We have quite a few errors right now. We'll be getting through them, I promise. So within the braces of our list, we're going to go ahead and create a for each statement. And we're going to add some brackets, and we're going to say notes. We'll then add another brace, and we'll say note in. We're going to add our text, note.title. So the for each is really useful for lists because it's essentially going to look at all of the values within our array or kind of list there, and it's going to go through each of them. So for all of the notes that we have, again, this is our kind of variable stored up here. We're then going to loop through all of the notes, and we're going to display the text, and in this case, the title of all of those notes to the user. Okay, let's go ahead and start to resolve some of these errors here. What we can actually do is outside of our list, so I'm going to go down to braces, we can actually add some style to the navigation and to the list. So we're going to start off by adding a navigation title. So we're going to do dot navigation title, and from here we can include some text. We represent text with the quotation marks for string values, and we'll call this one my notes. We're then going to include a list style. And from here, we can actually use dot notation. So within the brackets, we can use the period on our keyboard. We can kind of see all of the different options that we have. In this case, we'll keep it simple with that sidebar. You can try out the other ones if you'd wish. We're then going to also add a frame, so we can kind of choose the size. But the cool thing about frames, and when we have these windows that we might be expanding, we can actually just choose the minimum size or the maximum size. So for this one, within the brackets, we're going to do a min width with our camel case again. We're going to add a colon and give it a number value. We're going to go ahead and try 200. One thing you'll also notice is when we can't kind of build, our preview won't load until our code's kind of been fixed and it can compile. So a big error that we currently have is that we don't have detail. So let's go to the end of our navigation split view. A little trick that I like to do is just on the kind of left or outer side of the brace, you can double click and you can see all that encapsulates it. So what we need to do is outside of the navigation split view brace is we need to add a detail. We can add a colon, and this is where we can add another brace and then the kind of detail that's going to be for these notes. The next error we need to fix, and we can even click on this error thing, is generic structure of list actually requires our note to conform to hashable. This means just like with the identifiable, we need to add a protocol to our notes. What we can do is we can go back to our noteswift file, we can add a comma, and make this also hashable. And if you want to learn more, Option click. And it's basically going to say that this is a type that can be hashed into a hasher to produce an integer hash value for each of these items in the list. Now, when we go back to our content view, we can see that our error has been resolved. And finally, we'll be able to kind of see our preview where we have our welcome. We can see our kind of sidebar here with our little welcome text. All right, what do we want to add next? How about we add a toolbar to allow people to add new notes to our list. So after our frame and before our detail here, let's go ahead and add a .toolbar modifier. The toolbars are things that are typically at the very top of your app. We've used them in SwiftUI before for like cancel or save or even going back with navigation. So let's go ahead and add our braces, and we're going to add a button. And so buttons are things that you can press or interact with in order to have actions happen. And they also need names and labels. So we're going to make this button create a new note for us. We'll add another brace after our name here. And we'll establish a new note by creating a let statement, new note. We're going to have this equal a note from our structure. And again, let's go ahead and pass through with our autofill the title and the string. We can provide it with some default values, or we can even have blank values, but they need to conform to the strings. So we can have it just start off as untitled. And for the body, we can just add the quotation marks with nothing in it, not even a spacebar, to kind of pass through an empty string. But as long as there's a string value there, it'll be satisfied. Next, because we're using a list, let's go ahead and append that new note to our list. So we're going to reference our notes here. We're going to do the dot append. And then within the brackets, we're going to include that new element, which we just created here, of new note. Then our selected note is also going to update because we kind of want to move to what that selected note is showing. And that's what we want to show to the user. So we're going to have this equal the new note we had just created. And sometimes you might actually need to expand your preview to see the buttons. We could always change the minimum width here, but we can kind of see if we click on this button here, we have the new note. We're just going to add something called untitled to our preview here. Alternatively, if you don't want to test in the preview, you can also just run your app. As long as you don't have any errors, your build should succeed, and then we should have like this little macOS window pop up. And we can see that we have our app here, we have our little kind of sidebar here through our split navigation view, and we have our little button on the right side that helps us create the new note. Wonderful. When you're done, I would always suggest stopping running your app with this kind of square in the top left corner. Alrighty, and because we're going to kind of be sharing these notes across our app, let's go ahead and actually make our notes have some binding associated with them all the way at the bottom. So before our last brace, but not in the braces of our preview, we're going to create a private function and we're going to call it binding. And within the brackets, we're going to reference, some parameters. So when we're calling upon this function, what are we kind of using it for? Well, we're using it for the note, which is for our note structure here. We're then going to actually use the dash and then our kind of angled arrow here to make an arrow appear. So it's kind of that greater than symbol on your keyboard. And you can see on my text, it actually turns into an arrow. Yours might look a little bit differently. And then we're going to create a capital B binding. And then within those angled brackets, we're going to reference our note and add our squiggly brace. Next, we're going to create a guardlet, which is used for safety. And we're going to reference our index, which is going to equal the notes.firstIndex. And I'm going to actually choose the where autofill completion here. So it's going to look at the case of the very first item in the index, and actually within that index or array, actually represented by the number 0. So we're going to say where, we're going to add our squiggly braces, and then we're going to use the $ for our binding again, 0.id, so the very first item. We're going to use the double equal sign to look for something that's exactly the same of that note.id. Wonderful. And then we're going to create an else statement. So basically, if this condition isn't met, what else are we going to do? We're going to actually throw a fatal error. And within the brackets, we're going to say note not found, which is also why we're kind of creating that first note to begin with. In the case of we're using the guardlet, we also need to include a return statement. So outside of the else, but still within our function, we're going to create return. I'm going to reference the binding of the notes with the index within the brackets here. Oh, make sure that the $ is attached to the variable there. All right, and this is important because we're going to be kind of including a note detail view so people can actually see the titles and actually edit and change them. We're going to create a new SwiftUI view. So on the left side of our project inspector here, or using the plus button in the bottom left, we're going to create a new file from template. And you can see here that we have the macOS templates. We have the user interface, and there's even things like main menus, windows, etc. We're just going to be using the SwiftUI view today. We're going to call this one NoteDetailView. Go ahead and create that. We have our typical SwiftUI view with the placeholders, and under the structure, we're going to actually reference the @binding, and we're going to have our variable of note, which conforms to that structure of note. Now, something you'll notice whenever we kind of have bindings in our preview, it's not really going to love that because it's kind of expecting a value for us to kind of display, right? We're previewing this. You can kind of think of it like a sample of the app. So there's a couple of different ways that we can kind of handle this. You can see that we do have a suggested fix here. We want to include the binding value of the note down here, but you might not be able to find note in scope. So what I would suggest doing is in the preview, you can actually kind of make a state wrapper to simulate any editing. So you can add an @state var, not a private one, and we're going to call it sample note, which is going to equal a note with a title and body, and we can do preview, and we can also do like preview body. And then within the brackets here, we're going to have our note, which is going to conform to our sample note here. Make a little thing saying, hey, add previewable, but we should be good to go. Right now, our window literally just has the hello world because we're not actually displaying how that detail view is going to work, but we'll get there. So we're going to replace this text here with a VStack, and we can add our brace. So remember what I said at the beginning with the vertical stack, going to start with everything on top, and then subsequently as we add code, stack on underneath. The cool thing is too, you can actually add brackets and parameters within your different stacks and views. So in this case, we want to add some alignment. And we can have this be for dot leading. Everything's going to kind of start at the very beginning. So think of your text editors, right? You kind of have like sender justified and things like that. We're kind of aligning things within our UI. All right, let's go ahead and add a text field. And from here, we need to include a placeholder of text. So I'm going to go ahead and say title. I'm going to add a comma, and we need to say, okay, what is this text going to be related to? What value does this hold? Well, this is going to be for our binding of note, and specifically the title. So we're going to use the dot title to access the title property. We can also add the dot notation in order to kind of edit how this text field looks and interacts. We can even change the font of it. So we can do dot font. Then within the brackets, dot title. This is a title after all. We can also add some padding. What padding does is it kind of pushes things around the view to give it some space. But the cool thing is within the brackets, you can also customize how that padding works. Do we want to be horizontal? Do we want to create space on the top? Maybe in this case, because we're going to have our text underneath, we're going to create padding on the bottom. We can see that we have our preview with our kind of preview text that we've added down here already being shown within that text field, right? Because when we look at the title value, well, that's preview, but it is also a text field, and we can actually play around with this on the preview and type our text here and kind of see how it looks and interacts. And when there's no text, we get our placeholder of title, so people know what to put there. Okay, and we're actually going to add another place for people to add text, but this time we're going to be doing the text editor. So for the text editor, we can set it up in a pretty similar fashion, but with the text editor, it's a lot more room for people to interact with. So we want to have our text. We're not going to include a placeholder on this one, and we're going to have our binding of our note, but this time the body value. We can see here on our preview, the text editor is huge. It allows people to write more detailed notes. It's a lot better than just a small text field. Text field's more for like titles or people's names or email addresses, etc. We can also customize the font here, and let's make it .body. And maybe we can also add a border. And we can assign a color to that. So let's do color.gray, or maybe we can do white so it pops off a little bit more. A little bit too bright, so I'm going to add some opacity, and I'm going to make that opacity 0.5. There's so much customization you could do. We're just scratching the surface with this one. All right, and outside of our VStack, we can add some like global padding. And let's also add a navigation title so people know where they're at. and we'll add that as the note.title. So now that we have our detail view set up, we need a way to navigate to it. We need a way to be able to show that to users. So let's go back to our content view over here. And let's go ahead and in our detail here, we're going to create an if let statement. So we can kind of control two different cases. So in the case that we have a selected note, so we're going to have our note equals selected note. Add our brace, and we're going to reference our note detail view. And we're going to pass along some information. So our note is going to be the binding, which is why we also created that function down here, binding for, and we're going to reference that specific note. Then outside of the if let, we're going to create an else statement, add our braces, and then we're going to do our text of select a note. And we can even add a little bit of foreground style to this. And let's go ahead and have it be dot secondary. So now we can see, I don't have a note currently selected. So we have that foreground message saying, hey, please select a note. And even if we were to create a new note here, we're then taken to that detail view. We can even see in our preview how it works. So if I had a new note and I just put some text within our text editor here, hello, right? You can kind of play around with these different things. So we have a very, very simple macOS app currently, and we're not quite done because we have everything kind of set up. We have our nice tab bar here that also adjusts and edits the screen for us. We have the button to add the new notes, but currently if I'm clicking on the welcome, I'm clicking on this new note, it's not working. And in our list section here, what we need to do is we need to also add a tag for the notes. So we can kind of jump to the correct note within the section, enabling the click to select. So after the text, we'll add a tag. And within here, we're just going to have the tag of the note. Let's go ahead and relaunch our app. Something we can also consider adding later within our note app is persistence, because right now, every time we launch it, we kind of lose our apps. But now we should be able to kind of tab between them. We have our untitled, and I'll go ahead and say new note. Hello, and we can go to our welcome. Right, as long as the app's running, we kind of have all that data saved. Because we're not saving it with things like core data, it's not going to persist across app launches. But again, this is just a very basic tutorial. But let's go ahead and do a quick code review with what we've built today. The first things first, we have our note structure. So every note needs to basically have all of these things included. The UUID is taken care of for us, and the hashable allows us to kind of tag and go between those different notes on the left side of the screen, but all of them must have a title and body, so they're all kind of conformed to the same way. We go to our content view here. We have our private variables, and we're using state so we can update and see those updates in real time. We have our note as well as our kind of first sample note. If this here was kind of blank, we wouldn't actually have that welcome one that we can navigate to. And we're also tracking the currently selected note. Next, we're using a navigation split view, which is basically that sidebar, the list of notes. Well, let's go ahead and reload our preview so we can see it as well. So we have that sidebar here with that list of notes that we can also kind of hide for more space. We then have a list of all of our notes, and we loop through each one of them. So as we add more notes, they get added to that list on the side. We're using the text of the title for each of those to display them to the user. And then we're adding the tag to allow people to actually view and navigate to them. We have the navigation title for any of those notes. We even have our list style, which we can change. We're setting our frame to be a minimum width, so it always has to be at least that size. We can't shrink it down even further. We're then using the toolbar, which is kind of on the top right of our app here, where we have a button. On clicking said button, we can add a new note. And then this line here is going to actually automatically move us and have that selected note be the new note we just created. So essentially automatically opening it. Within the detail here, this is going to show the editable detail view for the selected note, which we've created over here with our text fields and our text editors. So this is what users can interact with their text information and input on their notes. We even added that little kind of else statement for when nothing's selected, for them to be like, hey, select a note with a little bit of user interface. Then within our function here, this is going to essentially find the selected note within the array and return a binding. So our edits persist Again, across app launches, we don't have that built in yet. And then the preview just allows us to kind of see it in this window here. So now you've got a real macOS SwiftUI app with a native sidebar, editable views, toolbar, and menu support. So in another video, we might look at saving notes to disk and adding Markdown for preview, but I do want to create some more macOS videos to kind of show a lot of the differences and the unique possibilities that are available in macOS in comparison to iOS development. So if this helped get you started, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what kind of macOS app you are looking to build and create. If you would like this sample app, it is available on my GitHub pages, link in the description below. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger, and have a great day.